or a manufacturer's rep does prior to full CDs and full contract being executed. So that's I think we'll get into that a little bit more on how we fit into that equation when it comes to some of these discussions.
Absolutely, yes. And it is Origin. It's going to take me a while to get that A name out of my mouth, I think, but really excited for you and your next step in this evolution of your company, AJ. So then the next vendor really is all of the vendors that are contributing to what be it lighting or walls. And so that's where we bring in Florian. So founder and really creator of this really interesting product that we're going to talk about today, which is a great hybrid option for some glass wall systems that we might be thinking through. So Florian, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Maureen, thanks for having me. Well, indeed, I'm the founder of Dynamic Hive, D-Hive. So we are a US company. I always start my presentation saying that because it doesn't sound like it, but we are. We are headquartered in Maryland. We manufacture everything in Maryland except for the glass that we source locally per projects. D-Hive has been in business for 10 years, so we're not a new company at all. And during the past 10 years, we've been able to install products in about 40 states, growing from literally a pure entrepreneurial adventure into probably one of the three largest independent wall manufacturers in the US. The ethos of our company is really to be fixing industry issues. That's probably how and why we grew so fast. When I created the company, I realized that the market was plagued by like many concerns, challenges, and we're probably going to talk about all of these. And those challenges impact everyone involved in the project. So the end users, but also the specifiers, the GCs, even the other trades. So that's what we try to fix, with also a slightly different positioning in terms of marketing, product quality, and pricing. We try to be extremely aggressive with pricing and positioning as the best value in the top tier market. So this is what D-Hive is a company fixing industry issues and delivering high quality at a lower cost, basically.
Awesome. That's great. And we love to hear that. So let's jump into it. So, designing with glass and designing in general, Stephen, what are the trends that you're seeing today, and how does glass play into how you assess designing on a project? And if you can, touch on any shifts you've seen in design trends due to COVID.
Sure, absolutely. So workplace design, it continues to evolve. We know some of the trends that are out there pre-pandemic. A lot of those continue to still be relevant, but they're only being accelerated by the presence of COVID-19. So we're going to talk about 4 of these that you see there on the screen. Next slide. So we know that fostering culture and connections is vital to any organization. We can achieve this through messaging and other communications within a space, but manifesting that in the physical form can be a little tricky. So we want to definitely create a workplace that allows you to see the inner workings of the organization and see each other, right? So that's one of the tools that we use as designers to build community. And in this example here, we arranged the campus of Modernizing Medicine with this collaborative bar in the center of the space, and we punctured that with sections of glass so that you can have sight lines and connectivity and views between the different neighborhoods. Next slide. The next idea is around agility and flexibility. So we know that real estate footprints are shrinking or were shrinking pre-pandemic, and it looks that this may accelerate in the future as organizations go to this work from home hybrid model. So spaces need to serve multiple functions and work harder. So rooms that can be expanded and compressed with operable walls allow for that flexibility. So this example here is our Gensler Charlotte office, where it shows a conference room that can be expanded to join the adjacent cafe and really allow us to create different types of settings. Next slide. Health and wellness. So we know that this is at the forefront of people's minds these days with COVID. Design strategies like air filtration systems, healthy snacks, and building amenities are part of that equation. But the biggest and probably easiest one to solve for is access to daylight and views. We know that there's studies out there that show that that promotes well-being and productivity. So this example here that is from a law firm up in Boston shows this interior conference room being afforded still the daylight and views, even though it is located on the interior of the space. And then last but not least is acoustic performance. So with the rise of video conferencing just being multiplied tenfold or more during this pandemic, we know that organizations are going to struggle to adapt spaces with this new normal. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on, but the construction of that room envelope and the glass system that is chosen all have positive and negative benefits or consequences. So in this example for BCI's Miami headquarters, we show a conference room with a glass wall system with a frame door, some acoustic wall panels, and what's not shown, walls going up to deck. So this all works together as a system to achieve that sound attenuation and privacy from neighboring spaces.
Great. Thank you. So then let's define glass walls. There's many different types, and AJ, why don't you walk us through what our options are out there?
So on a high level, we, usually in discussions is broken out into two major categories, which is conventional or demountable. Conventional is, the stick built, kind of built in the field. So this is when we either don't have the budget or the time to look at, some of these systems. We have to build it with local glass. We use top and bottom channels. Sometimes they have aluminum framing, again, with a faster process, but that you sacrifice maybe some design style. You sacrifice some of the sound properties that Stephen was mentioning. So usually this is kind of like a starting point for where you could start to have glass put in your space, and then it kind of the evolution of it into a demountable is something that also has subcategories. It could be a prefabricated system, meaning prefabricated in its entirety. This picture here has something where the glass and the frame comes together in fixed panels that are installed. That sometimes it's a prefabricated frame system. Then the glass comes separately and is installed in the field. And then then there's a hybrid of that where you can fabricate, install, or I'm sorry, you can cut and install prefabricated framing systems. And then order template and order glass from that point and use locally available manufacturers for glass. That helps with speed. So that's kind of what we call the hybrid in these discussions, and that's, I think, Florian can elaborate on what that means for the DHI product and kind of their solution to that demountable system.
Yeah, and before I jump to that, I just want to clarify here. Sometimes the client tells us, I want glass. I saw this office or that office and I want glass throughout the space. All offices need to have glass. All conference rooms need to have glass. They don't understand how complex answering that question for them design and budget-wise can be. So I think where DHI fits in is a really good hybrid between that stick built, which is maybe economical and gives them light transference, but doesn't solve any of the other challenges. And then the other solution solves many of the challenges, but then there's constructability and acoustic differences. So Florian, why don't you talk us through how is DHI different and how does your product fit in?
So actually, you make a very good point, Maureen. It's all about fixing or answering certain needs. So what a hybrid system is, or the way we build DHI, is we wanted to make sure we're retaining the best of two worlds. We wanted to retain the best of a demountable wall system and the best of a local glazer system. So what is the best of a demountable wall system? It is the control of the quality, the fact that you have much more architectural options, a better acoustic performance, more finishes. The processes are more professionally delivered because they're run by a factory. What is the best of your local glazer? It's easy to spec. It's like a very quickly delivered to the job site. There is no site preparation, and the cost is low. So we combine those two into a process that is very similar in terms of specification, or at least as easy as specifying your local glazing stick-built conventional system. When you work with DHI, you just say, well, I want a DHI glass front. There is absolutely no site preparation, and there is absolutely no hole to dimension. So that alone, in terms of process, saves about 4 to 8 weeks of coordination on the A&D side. So it significantly simplifies that process. It also prevents the requirement for floor leveling, which further saves a lot of cost on the construction side, on the site preparation. And we managed to do that by delivering our products partly prefabricated, so that we still have adjustability that can be obtained by making on-site adjustments. And by doing that, our tracks and our system will practically follow whatever site variations we find, almost with no limits to the variation, vertically or horizontally. So that makes a massive difference. We get the glass, we source it locally, we deliver it 2 feet. So we know that no matter what, our frames will fit, our glass will fit. That answers one of the, really the biggest problem, which is like the time it takes to specify a glass wall system, lowers the cost of the site preparation. It provides another very big advantage, which is to take the liability of a project. When you have a prefabricated wall system, no matter how much effort you've put before into making sure the site can welcome and has been built to welcome the wall system, its construction, there are always a lot of unexpected things. And it can be unexpected elements that are on site. It can be that the site dimension is slightly different from what it was supposed to be. It can also be human error, or a mistake for when you level the floor, or a sub that doesn't put the drywall where it's supposed to be. And when you run into these, then you run into, okay, how am I going to fix those problems? And if you have a prefab system, the system has very tiny adjustability. So usually it's the site that needs to cope with this. And that creates a lot of frustrations, delays the delivery, or at least fixing that issue, and usually ends up creating much more frustrations for the end user. So with the process of the we fix all those issues. So like really the process is key into making it different, into making it easy on everybody. And then being a hybrid solution through different processes, because we don't have the same process, also impacts how we can design the system. So for example, if you look at this picture, you see a butt joint glass wall that has a very slim frame. So the way we do it, the way we adjust on site, enables us to have a very slim and a very clean framing. Similarly, the way we do the seams is also a factor of how we have specified and delivered the glass on site, because we have much more accuracy into delivering the exact glass that we need to meet the site requirements, because we measure on-site dimensions. Well, now we can deliver glass that absolutely meet the site requirements. And so, for example, we can tape the panes of glass together instead of using silicone or other finishes. So the process makes it also like much more efficient in terms of delivering product differently. And if we look at the next slide, being a hybrid also enables us out of the same system to do framed glass. So it's about like all those are features. It's about trends. It's about giving the design accent. It's still a glass wall. But here you see a frame glass wall, a tall wall actually, that has transoms and verticals. Those are real transoms, those are real verticals. And out of that same wall, we briefly brushed, and we're going to talk more about single and double glass, but that frame glass wall at the Hive can do single and double glass, but it's also exactly the same system than the butt joint system we saw before. So we can mix up on the same job site, single and double glass, framed and butt joint, and still have a consistent design. So again, being faithful to our like ethos, which was to simplify the life of everybody, well, we also develop one system that's a platform that makes the specification process easy, even if you pick different features, if you have different needs on site.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's a great breakdown. And I know that was a lot of information, guys. So definitely you'll have some contact information for both Laura and Florian after this. And they do a really good job of explaining this in depth. So we're going to move on to our next slide, which is really what Florian was touching on, which is constructability and sequencing, talking about lead times, talking about what it takes to prepare a site. So as I mentioned in the intro, really early engagement of a quality general contractor allows us to collaborate during that design process and assist the team in budget expectations and design intent. So we really work together with the client on the cost assumptions and constructability and teach them all the complex areas that we need to get them to understand what goes into this. So AJ, what challenges do you think through on the GC side when you know you're going to be building with glass wall systems?
So there's usually two major factors that we kind of raise our hand and discuss right away with our clients is the schedule, the time frame, understanding they understand what the budget is, whether it's through preliminary pricing, whether it's through competitive bid process, they understand what they're paying for. We then have to talk about the construction timeline, and then we have to talk about, like Florian said, the flexibility or lack thereof of whatever the specified system is in comparison to our site conditions. So if we have floor leveling that needs to be done because there's a 1/4 inch tolerance over 10 feet for a system that's prefabricated. And also one of the biggest things that not only the cost that's associated with floor leveling, in the perfect world, you would finish something like this where you float out a space and then you take your measurements and then you send it to the factory for them to start production. Once you mark up your shop drawings on a product, our schedules and timelines don't allow for that. When you're working in an interior office market, the timelines are way too fast tracked compared to what that process takes. If you lay it out on paper, the glass will be coming a month or two after the tenant moves in, which is unacceptable. So what we're then tasked with, one of the challenges is unfortunately more often than I'd like, is we order hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of glass from Europe, promising a whole 2 dimension on a shop drawing. And now our teams are tasked with having to make sure that those openings are within a 1/4 inch based on the floor, which is the hardest one to adjust, obviously the headers and the walls that we build. And then when they arrive, the moment of truth is, if they manufactured them tight to those dimensions without a 1/4 inch of mishap, we finished that concrete floor without a 1/4 inch mishap, and it fits in perfectly. It's a very stressful process. There's a lot of time, effort, and money involved with that. So that's one of the big ones there. This is when you start to look at all of these factors. You look at the project schedule. Some buildings have very terrible slabs. Some have, decent slabs. And so we do surveys. We do, elevation surveys and heat maps to understand where the problems are going to be, overlay it with the floor plan. So all these things, they're extra work. I mean, it is why, we do what we do. But we have to basically relay all this to the clients. They have to understand. And we go through teams like Maureen who have, when you have an owner's rep involved, and they can explain to maybe somebody, to a tenant who doesn't do this every day, and understand what their options are. Those are some of the best, some of the biggest challenges we have.
Absolutely.
Next slide. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, we're going to jump into explaining this room within a room, and then we'll jump back to the cost estimating slides. Sure. So Florian, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at a conference room that is installed at Philip Morris in New York City. So the challenge of this one was that they wanted a curved, actually curved conference room, but their budget was not allowing for curved glass. So that's, curved glass is a real trend right now, but that practically no one can afford a curved glass, because basically a corner ends up costing about 10 grand. So this is and a conference room like this would have costed probably above $100,000. So as the budget was not enabled, they reached out to us. We were doing all the other glass fonts, and they wanted us to make it happen in still a very clean way. This is when all the benefits of the processes we talked about, they really will deliver even more advantages. If we had been a prefabricated wall system, then you get into everything that AJ just explained, except that here, the magnitude is even more complicated because you have a circle. What if the radius of the circle is slightly bigger, and now you need to redo everything? So the magnitude of the liability that is carried by the GC, but also the architects and all the team is pretty important for a project like that. With a system like dHive, with absolutely no floor leveling, we just came in and we adjusted our system on site. But not only we made it happen, but we also made it happen with a level of detailing that's extremely rare. So for example, the way we have connected every single piece of glass is by mitering every pane of glass. So we miter the panes, we tape them together, we miter the frame, and the installers who were installing this they're the biggest install shop in New York City. So they install practically everybody's system. And they were like, well, that's probably the easiest system we've put in place in a long time. And what's interesting is that is a very complicated assembly and with a very high level of detailing. So our concept does work when it's a straight line and a 90-degree, and basically when it's simple, but it also works when you really push the limit of it. And that is one of the demonstration of it. We have no punch list item here. And if you move to the next slide, you can see how clean it looks from inside. Literally, you can barely see the seams inside. For the story, one of the concerns we had for that specific conference room was echo. We were extremely concerned, and we voiced to the architect that that thing is going to echo, it's going to be unbearable. And so if you look at that picture, you can see like close to our top tracks, you see a rail that had been installed for a curtain and like heavy mass material, and like to prevent echo. And after the installation, they never installed those curtains for the reason that there is absolutely no echo. So, and that is thanks to the big furniture that they put in the room, the sound canceling system that they put. They also have like voluminous like lighting, and all that like prevent the sound from bouncing everywhere. Interestingly, it's also an extremely efficient room for acoustic performance. When you are inside that room and you close the door, like you really cannot hear anything without echo. So that was a surprising performance. But all in all, it's just beautiful. It's different, and we also managed to meet the client's budget, which was very close to just this of a straight conference room for this assembly.
Super cool.
This is really interesting, and it's stuff like this that I think, Stephen, you can probably relate to. But when you have a client that allows you to add some of these really creative design aspects into your space, it kind of helps make what we do kind of exciting and different, because it can be somewhat monotonous if you're just doing basic office after basic office. So what helps is when you have a client who's willing to let you get creative and seek out those vendors in the market that can help you find creative solutions for things. And then we have to get real with them about that creativity, right? So
Absolutely.
what's the cost? What's this going to cost me, right? And that's one of the main questions that I am constantly battling with clients on is estimating. And so I lean on people like AJ to sort of help me talk to the client about costs, even if they're not officially engaged. Sometimes I can call him on the side and sort of say, here's the linear footage we're talking about. Can you help talk me through it? So oftentimes a client will say, well, I want glass, and the alternative to glass is drywall. So what does drywall cost? And then what does the different glass options cost? So AJ, if you could walk us through how your team approaches this question, that'd be great.
Sure. So yeah, bringing in this discussion early on, I think is important, because what can be really detrimental to the project, especially the timeline, is when you get something, the pie in the sky is designed, all the renderings are shown, and the client falls in love, and then when the budget comes back, it kind of hits them in the face, and they have to face reality at that point, and then we have to scramble and really come up with a solution. Which it's the same exercise, it's just done a little bit more, kind of like I said, a little bit more rapid. But what we try to do is show them where they're at with their design. I mean, drywall, can be anywhere from $50 to $70 a foot, depending on really what you're doing acoustically, finishes on the wall, finishes on the floor, where it meets the floor and those kind of things. So it's obviously the most cost-effective way, but rarely anybody wants to build an office with absolutely no glass, where they feel like they're kind of in a closet, so to speak. Minimally, there's some sort of side light. They want to have some transparency. The first discussion is square footage. How much glass do you need, right, at a minimum, and what can you afford? Once you determine your bare minimum glass square footage you must have, we do takeoffs like you see here. When this was a project where the client, we built 7 locations for Pipeline Workplaces, and we are very involved and very intimate with the owner, so we have to help them figure out the most cost-effective way to get their glass systems. They were using a demountable system that was recommended by their furniture vendor for their first 3 locations. They were paying a premium for it, and there was a lead time issue, but it was a nice product. It did have a good STC rating, so it was checking off a lot of boxes. But again, they came to us and said, how do we save money? Moving forward, our metric is not working. We need to come up with a solution. So we go through and do a takeoff, and we stripped on this floor plane here, we stripped off all the numbers so that it was easier to read for this purpose. But every single one of those blue lines has a linear footage down to the inch. We know the height of the system, so we come up with our linear feet of wall. And then we basically did a quick table here to kind of show a comparison of different options. If you have 387 feet of wall, we know at that point what the linear feet cost. So we show them photos, we'll show them portfolio if they can see examples of different types of systems. But they started off here with, we'll call it vendor A, and this was a demountable system that was prefabricated, as far as prefabricated glass. It was not a pre-assembled system, but it was prefabricated metal that created with the glass, and you have to assemble it on site. This is where you have very low tolerance. But this was the pie in the sky design. So at $578 a linear foot, they had their total cost of $223,000. We then worked through them, because they basically come to us saying, how do we save money on glass? That's it. It was a low hanging fruit on that budget. It was a big number. They needed to understand how to save money. And we went through options with the market that we currently have, or with the information that we have currently active in the market. We did another demountable system very comparable to theirs, but it was a lower cost option. We did show them what frameless glass would cost, so they can understand if you just put, butt joint glass with the silicone joints in the frameless U channels, you can see what you're going to get. But we also show them their cons, understanding the numbers attractive, but you have to look at losing STC ratings. You're not getting the, sometimes you have the longer lead time items for the demountable systems. This was a perfect fit for us to bring in a hybrid system. So Florian never really pitched his product to us. We organically came into business together because of projects that were our clients were similar fits. They were coming through design teams. So then this is Pipeline Orlando. We subsequently used it in Pipeline Tampa, and we're currently working with the client to test fit out 2 more spaces in the state. So this is a perfect example of how you can kind of hold everything side by side, look at the pros and cons, and then prior to entering into CDs, and then once the job's green lit, we already are fast tracking, submittal packages and the products available and on site way before we need it, and it doesn't hinder the schedule at all.
Absolutely. And just to add to this conversation a bit, sometimes in the process of talking through this cost comparison, we'll also talk about the 5th option or 6th, whatever it is, in terms of reducing scope. So you see here is highlighted in blue is areas where we're currently assuming we're going to have glass systems. If by doing that cost comparison, we're still not meeting that client's budget needs, we then look at where else can we cut scope and convert some of these glass wall fronts to maybe a drywall front with a glass door and keep the glass on just the door. Or maybe we may look, okay, front of house, that's really important for clients who are visiting to see an upgraded space. We want glass as well as our partner offices, right? There's the reason there's the corner office. And then maybe back of house, some of these other areas we may sacrifice. And in that way, we can really meet in the middle and get the client what they need in terms of the budget and stay true to the design intent, which is to bring in light into the space and all those other benefits that Steve spoke about earlier. So just moving on here, let's talk about some of these case studies, because we've had some really good examples as we thought through how we've collaborated together on projects. We came up with some really good examples. So Stephen, why don't you walk us through some of these options or projects?
Thanks, Maureen. So this is the case study of Pipeline, and as AJ started off, we've worked with this client through multiple locations. They're a co-working community, very heavy on private offices, as obviously people rent those out for their office space. So at the inception of working with the client, we were working with a demountable system through the furniture vendor. And as that became cost prohibitive moving forward, the client asked us to look at different options to reduce cost. One of them being here, more of a stick-built system. What we quickly realized is that came at the expense of that better acoustical performance that the end user was looking for. So as we moved into the next phase of build-outs in Orlando and in Tampa, which will be the next 2 slides, we found that the D-Hive system really struck that right balance of performance and cost to meet not only the budget, the aesthetic, but also that technical criteria of the acoustic performance. And it also afforded us some flexibility in the design. So here in this image, you see we did the glass with a wood door. And then the next image from Tampa, we did a sliding glass door.
Yeah, and there are some really great reasons why that we'll get into with Florian on the swinging doors versus sliding doors and acoustical properties. So let's jump into, that's a great segue here, is into the noise and SCC ratings. Oftentimes a client will say, I want glass, and they don't understand that the stick-built glass system brings with it some unique challenges, and that some of the other solutions can help solve those challenges. But aside from just the glass system, there are other elements of that built environment, Stephen, that you and the MEP engineers are having to solve for in the design. So I'd like AJ to touch on some of these things. What do we need to be aware of, and what do we need to solve for in that process? And what is STC?
Right. So sound transmission class is basically, a rating that an assembly or a product is given to understand the transmission of sound through it, and which is basically, how audible can you hear conversations. That's really what it boils down to for most people, because that's the biggest, in a workplace, that's the most important factor that we're trying to drown out. In addition to, so the previous budget slide and we were talking about, that was strictly isolated, glass discussion, that taking out any other factors. But then we talked about floor leveling, we talked about the glass itself. But all of this, means nothing if you put in a expensive assembly that you pay for instead of doing frame, stick built glass. You pay for a demountable system to have an STC rating to allow for some privacy. But then you don't, skimp out on your ceilings or your wall assembly or above your ceilings, and then all of a sudden, you still have all the same problems you had, and you spent the money on that glass. So we have to look at it globally with the client and have them understand what they're using as far as their products that are going on the walls, what they're using for flooring, what their ceilings are built from, as far as acoustical ceiling tiles, hard ceilings, any insulation that's put above them. But then also just points of weakness, which is usually any gaps between glass doors or below glass doors, your return grills and transfer cutouts that are cut through walls. So we use sound boots and we use dampening materials, and we try to show them, you can't take away everything and just have something that's beautiful without knowing what's going to happen to your privacy and your sound transmission. So we walk them through all those items in the budget because they're broken out separately. They're not part of the glass price, but they're built in. And unfortunately, if you don't talk about this early on in the onset of design and pre-construction budgeting, the only time the client really finds out about it then is once they've occupied the space and construction is complete. And at that point, it's the scramble to throw some insulation on top of your ceiling tiles and buy a bunch of white noise that's really expensive that helps, but it doesn't eliminate the problem. And so teams like this panel understand that we've done this so many times, and we have to educate the clients and make sure that they understand this is money well spent if sound attenuation is important to them at all. And so we have to walk them through all the things that are involved. So glass is just a piece of the puzzle. All these things that are surrounding it as well are just as important.
Right. And I think from the owner's rep perspective, our job is really about understanding the needs and setting expectations to avoid, upsets at the end of a project, and then wondering and pointing fingers as to who's to blame for not having solved that problem, when really maybe the blame is more so about what the expectation really was, and really laying out what we were getting. So oftentimes I explain to clients, you got to remember that sound is a wave, right? It's a vibrational frequency, and there's many different ways to affect that transmission of the sound wave. A lot of it is through blocking, meaning adding additional sound batting within walls or on top of that acoustical ceiling tile. Maybe we're going to upgrade the ceiling tile spec because there's one that have higher STC ratings. Maybe we are going to add white noise. So white noise, rather than block sound waves, actually muffles it. So when we go back to that slide about sound transmission, and on the left here, you can see, you have to talk to the client and let them know, you may hear the person next to you, but you're not going to understand what they're saying in terms of a confidential conversation, unless that happens to be your CEO who's a yeller, right? That maybe you're going to hear him. So it's really about setting that expectation and then talking about creative ways that we can help mitigate sound transmission. So just jumping into a couple other ways that there are differences between the DHAC product and maybe stick built. I think, Stephen, we were going to have you touch on this slide, I believe, and talking about seals, or maybe it was Florian, forgive me.
Florian, I think,
It was Florian. Yeah, if you want to take it, Florian, go right
Yes,
ahead.
seals are very important, because speaking acoustic it's all about air transfer. So air is sound. So that's and sealing the space just prevents air from being transmitted, so sound being transmitted. So depending on the type of systems you use, you will very likely end up with this or that type of seal. And if you use a conventional glazing system, you will very likely end up with silicone seals. because this is the way conventional glazers use like between the thickness to buy tolerances. So that's how they deal with that. Most prefabricated demountable walls have a higher end way of dealing with seals, and generally they use polycarbonate extrusions. So it's some form of clear plastic that has an H form and that's installed in between the panes of glass. And the Hive uses VHB tape. So VHB tape is just the highest end way of doing a seal. Glazers cannot use it because they don't have the accuracy in making, like ordering their panes of glass. And most demountable wall systems don't want to take the risk of doing that, let alone the fact that it costs more to do it the way we do it. But we have the processes, we have the quality fabrication that we need. And so we tape the panes of glass together. The picture that you see on the left is actually the inside view, a zoomed in view of a corner, a 90-degree corner. So where we miter the glass and we tape it. So this is how clean it looks. Same thing. That's just the highest end way of doing an angle or a corner with punch-on glass.
Awesome. Okay, and then I think actually what we're gonna do is, hold on, my slide advancing got stuck. So I think we're gonna go into more of the D-Hive solution and acoustics. And we have a couple questions that have come up as well. So one of them is from Rebecca. She wants to know about adding, tinting that glass or adding logos. And then Arturo also had a question regarding telescoping walls. So I think you see those questions in the chat. So if you could address those in the course of this next section, that would be great.
Absolutely. Well, I can just like start with Rebecca's question. Yes, they can absolutely be tinted, just like they can be etched. Our recommendation is actually to save on that. Do not purchase actual tinted glass nor etched glass. Go with clear glass and then let AJ source like a film. The technology for glass film has become so good. It's about 4 to 5 times less expensive than architectural glass or etched glass, but it just looks like it. And on top of that, it's non-permanent. So if you damage it or if you want to peel it and just like change the design, or the next tenant wants to change the design, you can also do that. So, and that applies to any form of logo. And actually lately, that's one of the trends we see our walls becoming a surface. So, and it's no longer just a surface for transparency, it's also a surface just to express the company's culture, the company's branding. And that doesn't just go through logos, but it goes into things that are like pretty sophisticated, into design, and like the entire piece of glass as a film that now looks like, you know, whatever it can be. Like we've done the offices for Zillow recently, and like you had like a 50-foot long wall that was just a map of New York City, like floor to ceiling. So you have many ways of using the wall as the glass as a surface. In terms of the way we run into acoustic, and this will help me answer the questions for Arturo. So like you actually see a project we've done with Gensler in Miami. I'm not sure if AJ, were you on?
Yeah, this was our...
So I mean, super cool project. I always said it was a pretty bold specification because you have a team room that's installed inside a conference room. So here we've used double glass. So double glass is typically the only way to really significantly increase the acoustic performance. The acoustic performance comes from the airspace. So that's why most demountable wall systems end up for their double glass solution with a 4-inch wide track so that they have a lot of airspace in between their panes of glass. D-Hive, we managed to achieve the same acoustic performance than our competitors out of a 3¼ wide track. So that just shows that the system itself is built with less leaks, and that comes from the way it's constructed, the way we assemble the seals inside that. And as the single and the double glass system is the same, even when you go single glass, you still benefit from that assembly that's different and that delivers the performance. So the immense majority of our clients, they will just go with single glass. The single glass performance, if you want to show the next slide, the single glass performance always comes from an acoustic performance in general, starts with doors. doors are your acoustic weak spot. So it's not a D-Hive thing. It's like literally any wall, any partition, whether it's a solid wall or a glass wall. So if you have a bad door, you have a bad acoustic performance. That's why when you look at most conference rooms that have frameless pivot doors, and that's why the frameless word is like almost a bad word in the acoustic world, because it's like you have nothing. It's almost like closing that door has no purpose anymore. So part of like fixing those industry issues, we worked out delivering seals, but we still wanted to keep an appealing design. So when we do a glass door, it's always a frameless glass leaf, but when we close that doors, there is a door frame. Inside the door frame, you have seals and gaskets, and those gaskets always contact with the door. So on that picture, you can see a sliding door. The leaf is frameless, but you have a doorway. In the doorway, you have seals. They do contact with the glass. On the next picture, you have a swing door that's latched, but you have the leaf is frameless. It could be a wood door as well, but as a glass door, it's a little more unique. But when you close the door, it latches tight into the door frame. What we did to move to the next level was to add a drop seal to that door. So drop seals are not a new technology at all. What's a little newer is that we see a lot of spaces with hard floors, whether it's concrete or like wooden floors, and the sound bounces on the floor. So that accentuates that accentuates sound propagation through the bottom of the door. So bridging that gap is very important, and we have a solution for that, whether it's solid or glazed. So the combination of, and that's something that AJ really touched on, and that's so important, you Maureen as well, is that most of the clients, they focus on the glass phones because they focus on privacy and you are being visible now. So they think they lose privacy because of that. So of course, that's one reason why you may have glass film in the future. But the sound privacy does not only come from us. It comes from a combination of products. So we are just one of those factors that will deliver a good acoustic performance. So that's why we always recommend to our clients, do not start with double glass. Start with a good door and then do a drop seal and then spend your money on everything else. The drywalls, like Steve was mentioning at the beginning, that's what you don't see. The walls go all the way up to the deck, the sound batting, the acoustic tiles, everything else. And then only you move to double glass, because before that, you're wasting clients' resources. When you then move to double glass, there are a lot of little other details that actually are not coming from the app you may take care of. So for example, on the project that you see here, the architect, they took care of like putting heavy mass material behind the outlets that are in the drywalls in between the rooms, just to make sure that now that little hole that they built was not creating an acoustic weakness in between the rooms. So those are issues that the clients have, and then they tend to blame it on whatever they can, think that they can blame it on, or like a thing that the sound comes from the glass, but it doesn't. It comes from that little hole in the wall. So acoustic performance is always key. On this picture, you see also a solution of the app that's very unique, still dealing with acoustic performance, which is a double glass return. So when doing T connections, which is very pretty, it increases penetration of light, it increases transparency. The big challenge though is that putting a piece of glass in between the office now creates an acoustic weakness in between the rooms. You may have an STC 45 drywall that goes all the way up to the deck, but now the sound is just going to go through that pane of glass. And making the pane thicker or even laminated will increase cost, but never reach the performance that double glass can deliver. So for General Electric, a few years ago, we engineered that solution, which is a double glass return that can either meet a double glass front, but much more unique, it's a double glass return that can meet a single glass front. And so now we have fixed the problem in between the rooms, because that rates at least STC 42, depending on the configurations. It's very clean. There is absolutely no seam. We don't use silicone. We don't use tape. We use pressure seal, so it's perfectly clean. We conceal the green edge of the glass. So it's a lot of little details that make that solution like very nice and pretty to integrate. It's inexpensive, as the only extra cost is one small piece of glass, but ultimately it is functional. And a second function is that we do not need to spec double glass everywhere to benefit from that. You can still keep your single glass wall, so you maintain your cost, you lower the overall project cost. Let's also keep in mind that the acoustic from office to corridor or office to open space is much less important than office to office.
Yes.
So this is the problem that we also fix or take care of. To answer Arthur on the telescoping wall solution, so that's something we do not offer, The reason for us not offering that is that telescoping walls tend to have a terrible acoustic performance. And we just do not want our brand to be associated with that. There are some foldable walls, movable walls that do answer the acoustic concerns. They are usually double glazed, they are very heavy. There are a couple brands doing that. They've been around forever. There is no real manner to really deliver a good acoustic performance when you have a foldable wall than doing those like, super heavy, super expensive wall solutions. So for us to do just the telescopic, which is much less expensive, but now we would not deliver on the acoustic performance. We just don't want to associate our brand with that. So there are a few conventional solutions that do that. A few other wall systems do that. Typically, when we do a project, we will just take care of everything, and that specific scope is just left to someone else. And it just works well. For us, it's just giving us more peaceful nights, because clients would tend to just say, hey, D-Hive acoustic is terrible because of that specific room, while everywhere it would just deliver. So at least we don't have that issue.
Yeah, and I do think it's really a testament to your vision for the company to really stick to what you're good at and be willing to walk away from those portions of the work that just don't align with what it is that you're trying to do for the market. And I do find that sound transmission is one of those things, just like a leak that could be happening on the other side of the building, and you're experiencing it trickle down into this and present in a wet ceiling tile, but it's not even sourced from above that ceiling tile. So it's really interesting. When we started this conversation, we said we're going to talk about glass walls, and here we are spending 20, 30 minutes on talking about sound and acoustics. And that's because it really ties so tightly in together to be able to satisfy the client, to make sure the client is happy at the end of the day with what we're giving them. So that's why it's so important that you have quality consultants on your project, like this panelist, who can really educate the client and walk them through all of this. They don't understand that that's what they're getting into at the outset of the project. So I think that really brings me to my next slide. Really, Stephen and I wanted to touch on the fact that you can get it cheap, you can get it fast, or you can get it good or done well, right? Pick two. And that is, we try to talk the client through that all the time. And again, it's about setting those expectations. But Stephen, can you talk us through, how do you address balancing design with functionality and helping the client make decisions in that process? And we do only have 2 minutes left, so make it quick.
I will keep it quick. No, so I think, you hit the nail on the head. You can have a little bit of everything, but I always tell clients that the space needs to perform first. You're going to be living in it for a long time, and a beautiful space does nothing for you if it doesn't perform. So the example of this image here, I think, is a good story that leads to that. So we've been working with City National Bank on their new headquarters space, and our design team was challenged with a tight budget and value engineering. Stick-built glass was on the table as a solution, but we said, wait a minute, I think we want to take a deeper dive and another look at this. So, we worked with D-Hive, and we were able actually to save the client money and still get the wall system that we wanted, that performs well. It looks great. It achieves all the, checking all the boxes in the design column. And it also was able to solve another feature. We have very tall ceilings in this space, about 10 to 12 feet. So by introducing that horizontal member and the transom, we were able to get the full height glass that we wanted, without, doing crazy gymnastics. So
yeah, that's great. Okay, well, wrapping up here, you've got all of our contact information here on this slide. Again, you can reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to make a direct introduction to each of these panelists if you would like. Definitely use us as resources as you think through your career and your projects that you may be assigned on. We would love to talk to you and help you out in any way, shape, or form. I think everyone on this panel is very giving in that way, and I certainly appreciate that as an owner's rep, because I don't know it all. And that's, again, going back to what I said in the introduction, the reason that I wanted to do this table learning experience is because there are things that I don't know about. I needed to know more about glass wall systems and how do I advise my clients. And so being able to tap into resources like this is valuable to me. We hope to do more of these in the future. The learning table future topics are when on AA contracts, what are they and what do we want to negotiate on behalf of our clients? Obviously, from the architect's perspective in the DC, what do you want to negotiate on your behalf so that we have a fair contract in hand? And then also a lot of property managers have been asking me about HVAC conditions, and post-COVID, what do we do to sort of mitigate some of the transmission of viruses, et cetera. So we're going to touch on those two topics in our next Learning Table events. I do also have an event next week that I'm excited about. I'm speaking at Spark by Luli B, which is a women's empowerment conference, and I welcome you to join me to that. It's a drive-in experience in Miami, and the panel I'm speaking on is Women Who Pivot. So with that, I'm going to pivot, I think, off of this call. Thank you guys again so much for attending, and I really appreciate you joining in. Let me know if there's any future topics you'd like to learn about, and thank you so much. Any closing remarks? AJ, I'll go around the room. AJ, any closing remarks?
No, thank you for having me. And like Maureen said, if anybody on the panel wants, I grabbed everybody's list, and I'll reach out to you, whether it's on LinkedIn or whatever. Send me an email, and if you guys need any of our resources like we gave here, that comes, you know, just with a phone call to us, we'd be happy to help you in any of your potential projects.
Fantastic. Florian, any closing remarks?
No, thank you very much. I mean, we're just available. We're here to support you, answer any of your questions. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Awesome. Stephen?
Nope, thank you. And I echo everyone else's comments, here to help.
Awesome. And Laura, as a sponsor for this event, thank you again for doing this for us. And any closing remarks?
Nope, thank you very much. And as I said, like, I'm here locally, so, you know, reach out to your manufacturers.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon, great rest of the week.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.